This was Malcolm Elliott a year ago, winning the Prologue time trial on the Kelloggs Tour. With it went the yellow jersey. He never lost that jersey, going on to win the race in Westminster. Today, the defending champion faces exactly the same task, a tough, short, testing prologue, taking us from the centre of Dundee to the top of one of the city's famous landmarks, the Law. And this is the view that will confront the riders as they sit anxiously at the start before a massive flow of adrenaline will start pumping those legs, and they're away on their own against the clock. Hello and welcome to the start of the '89 Kelloggs Tour, which promises to be the best yet. 500 miles lie ahead of us, 3 countries, 8 cities we'll be travelling through. This a genuine pro tour of Britain. And all the big names are with us now too. Sean Kelly, Robert Miller, to name a couple, and Elliott, who'll be last away from here today. That's his right as the defending champion. He'll know what he has to do when he leaves. And to reiterate, the opening prologue time trial, each man against the clock, trying to produce the best time. The course, well, they start here in the city square, ride through Dundee along Reform Street, then it's right into Meadowside, and then the climbing really starts. It's only 2.5 miles, this course, incidentally, but it's tough along Hilltown, a little easier along Kinghorn Road before the sting in the tail along Law Road, and that walnut whip of a finish at the War Memorial. The Law, incidentally, in case you're wondering, the high point in Dundee, a city of 176,000 people. Half that number, they say, live along the route, so there should be plenty of vocal support on the roadsides. Let's pick up the riders then. Joey McLaughlin, the winner of this tour in 1987, back from injury now, is on the roads. Our commentators, Paul Sherwin and Phil Liggett.
And as we see the face here of Joey McLaughlin, it's showing signs of the pain of this steep climb up to a height of 572 feet from sea level. And McLaughlin today trying to race himself back into the picture, Paul.
Well, yeah, Joey's just coming back from an operation to remove a cyst from his knee, and he's going to have a very hard time in this Kelloggs Tour because he's had little competition really since early on in the classic season. Joey's going to find himself short in mileage from training and also short in the racing mileage.
But he's turned now onto the narrow approach to the summit of the Law and up to the War Memorial right on the top. This is without doubt the most difficult section, but the riders have no respite from the slope at all. McLaughlin having to fight hard now to keep his rhythm. Crowd enjoying their first sight of the Kelloggs Tour of Britain here in Dundee, and it's just about now where the pain is going to get through to Joey McLaughlin.
Well, as you look at Joey's position here, you can see he really is suffering already. We're going down to the start here. This is Angel Camarillo. He's going to be one of Malcolm Elliott's teammates for later on in this tour.
So Camarillo starts off. A Spanish rider who should enjoy the slopes of the Law climb, and a good crowd in the town centre there. But we're now coming up towards the summit. There is the finish to the right of our picture, the War Memorial itself, and it now looks as though McLaughlin is beginning to suffer just a little bit.
Well, as we go back to Joey there, you can just see that the nodding of his head there is really the sign of a rider who hasn't got the strength there, the strength that you get from racing on a regular basis, racing in the Tour de France, racing 2 or 3 times a week. Joey really suffering a little bit here, but the one thing that McLaughlin has got that could get him through this Tour of Britain is his sheer courage and determination.
A little bit of good news for Joey as well is that the organisation has remeasured the course. It's not in fact 2.5 miles, but only 1.7, so it's not quite so far, Paul, to suffer.
Well, it isn't, but at the end of the day, the riders have all been out to look at the course, so it doesn't make much difference to them whether it's 2.5 miles or 1.7. They know it's going to take them roughly 6 or 7 minutes.
Well, this is the tight bend that helter-skelters its way up now, corkscrew fashion to the summit, where the crowd will be waiting to welcome McLaughlin, the winner of the Kelloggs Tour 2 years ago. He finished second last year to Malcolm Elliott and won a stage as well. Now he wants to see if he can get off to a good start. He did say to me earlier on, though, that he didn't know if he could be competitive or not, because he didn't know what his leg would be like. But 6:20.53, that's the best time so far. As we return down to the bottom, this is Martin Early of Ireland, the PDM rider who had a marvellous World Championship last Sunday, where he finished 7th.
Well, Martin's having quite a good year this year, actually. With that Tour de France stage victory, it put him up to 4 victories so far in this year.
And this will be the arrival, Paul, of Camarillo, who started 1 minute behind McLaughlin. He's going to beat McLaughlin, 6:16.04, and that is the new leader. And this is Martin Early, who had a bit of a shock today when he found his handlebars are badly twisted after the journey here. So he's fitted new ones, and he's now climbing steadily up to the summit of the Law. Riding very, very smoothly indeed. And this looks like Laurent Jalabert, a new professional, coming up with a great time. Look at this, 6 minutes, 0.53 seconds, the new leader. And that is something of a surprise. So Martin Early now has a new target to beat, and he won't know that the man ahead of him, Jalabert, has set the best time of a fraction over 6 minutes for the climb. Martin Early now coming round to the finish, and the target he's aiming at is 6 minutes, 0.53 seconds. We should catch a glimpse of the clock, maybe. Yes, 6 minutes, 0.63, a tenth of a second too slow for Martin Early. He goes second. Well, this is Pascal Lance here, the teammate, in fact, of Jalabert, who's making the start at the bottom of the climb. And the rider, in fact, who should be ahead of him on the road will be the Fagor rider, Francis Moreau. And this indeed is Moreau coming up, teammate of Stephen Roach, who is not here. He finishes 3rd, best time, a little bit of a surprise too, 6:5.04 for him. Now I wonder what Paul Curran will manage, former British hill climb champion, Commonwealth Games gold medalist before he turned professional this year. He's off. Well, we should see Pascal Lance coming through. Here he is. And his teammate Jalabert is already home, but Lance has gone a fraction better. 6 minutes, 0.31 to go top of the leaderboard. He's just pipped his teammate as Jalabert. And down there below us is Paul Curran. And Paul Curran is reported to be on a ride. Well, there's Pascal Lance going down the mountain, but can Paul Curran on his way up do anything about the time? And he can't. Yes, he can. 6.17. Now that's going to take some beating. Paul Curran, the best time. So Paul Curran goes number 1. He also wears a 51. These are the situation now overall at the moment. Paul Curran on top. Pascal Lance is second.
Paul, great ride, 6:00.17, new leader.
Yeah, well, I'm quite early off. I'm number 36 off, so there's quite a lot of good lads behind me, so see how long it lasts. It might last a little while, but I don't think I'll win it.
Is it tough out there?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's the sort of climb where you have to pace yourself a little bit, 6 minutes. You can't go sort of hell for leather right from the bottom. You have to save us a little bit.
Well, this is Brian Walton. I mentioned Paul Curran's number there of 51. It's the most famous number in the Tour de France. It's been worn by more winners of that race. I wonder if it's an omen for Paul Curran in this year's Tour of Britain. This is Brian Walton here. His only major win as a professional, the milk race in England this year. Now he's going to go for what would be a unique double if he could pull off the full professional Tour of Britain. So Brian Walton climbing towards the summit. Paul Curran is heading the leaderboard with that ride a fraction outside 6 minutes. The clock is on the right. Well, he's gone past Paul Curran's time. Only 5th place for Brian Walton, 6:3.55. This is the British champion, Tim Harris, down in the basement in Dundee, now facing the climb. He's having his best ever season. Tim Harris from the rally team, of course, as he heads off now up towards the summit. Ronan Ponsek coming up. Had a disappointing Tour de France this year, and he finishes only 26th, 6:21.81. So, Phil Anderson on the start blocks now, the man with the long hair and the flying legs, the only Australian to wear the leader's jersey in the Tour de France. He's heading off the stars in this race, so join us after the break. And welcome back to the opening prologue time trial in this year's Tour of Britain. And Tim Harris here now approaching the finish. Remember that the leader so far is Paul Curran, but the British champion now coming up towards the finish line. Just over 6 minutes to beat, but he won't do it. 13th place for Tim Harris, 6:13.83. So this is the situation so far. Paul Curran keeping his lead, 6 minutes, 0.17. Pascal Lance is second, and Laurent Jalabert is in third place. Well, this is Phil Anderson now, who's partway up the climb of the Law. Remember this hill, which takes them right up to 572 feet. Phil Anderson, the first ever, and indeed the only Australian to wear the yellow jersey in the Tour de France, which he did now a few years ago. He was back in that race this year, and a winner, of course, this year of a stage in the Tour of Italy.
Well, this is the hardest part of the circuit here for a rider who may have started quickly. A lot of the riders early on in the race today have been cracking here, but Phil looks like he's still going very strongly. He's fighting the bike all the way to the top of this climb.
Well, Anderson, former stage winner, is now looking for victory on top of the Law. It's a real tough climb that the organisation sorted out for the riders here, because after this, of course, they then face 4 long road racing stages to take them down to Cardiff and then off to the city of Westminster for the final circuit race next Sunday. Early days, but these short time trials can so often affect the race. Remember that Malcolm Elliott won at this stage a year ago in Newcastle upon Tyne, and he ran out the winner overall. This is Sean Kelly now, taking the last few deep breaths before making the effort that may well put him on top of the leaderboard in the Kelloggs Tour. Sean Kelly goes then. A little bit disappointed, I think, with his third place in the World Championship a couple of days ago. And now we go back up to the top of the hill. Anderson struggling for his gears here. Looks as though he may have lost a little bit of time with that bad change. There's the crowd up on the hill there.
Well, this really is the hardest part of the course, Phil. As you can see, a lot of the riders here struggling, changing gears, trying to find a gear that's comfortable. But when you get to this part of the race, all the gears feel uncomfortable.
So Anderson making his way up towards the top. It's still Paul Curran who's keeping himself on top of the leaderboard. And that's a great ride by Paul. He didn't go to the World Championships last Sunday. He certainly had the selection to go, but he felt he wasn't fit enough for such a rigorous race as the World Championship. But he's a great rider. For the last 4 years, until he turned professional this year for the Bilton team, he was indeed Britain's finest amateur rider. Still Anderson here, climbing around the circuit that brings him up to the top of the Law. He's been out of the saddle now, I think, for the last 500 or 600 yards, working very hard up to the summit. 6 minutes is the time to beat, and it looks as though Phil is not going to do that. He's already outside Curran's time. 6:06.04, 8th place for Phil Anderson. And that's his wife Shelley there, putting the blanket round him as we go back down to the start. And Keith Reynolds, who's had a string of second places this year in major races all over Britain, and would dearly like to get himself a good win. A great rider, Keith Reynolds, a former British hill climb champion when an amateur rider. So this hill here will hold no fears for him. And down there is Sean Kelly, who's now settling into the climb nicely, but he doesn't seem to be moving with any great fluidity, Paul.
Well, I think what's probably resting on Sean's mind at the moment is the fact that he's ridden the World Championships just 2 days ago, and that was 170 miles. Finishing third was a big disappointment, but also the tiredness and the fatigue will still be in his legs a little bit.
He too riding his spare bike today, because like Martin Early, his bike was also badly damaged on the air flight over here. So Kelly might feel a little bit disturbed mentally about that. He's a man who is very particular about his equipment.
Interesting thing there is, Phil, at this part of the climb, Kelly's just put it onto the big ring, which most of the riders in the past so far have used a small ring and forced the way up to the top. But there you can see Kelly's on the large chain ring.
What a strong man he is. Trying to keep a high tempo going. He knows of all the riders in this race just how valuable seconds here are in a stage race at this distance. Concentrating, the occasional glance up front just to see where the finish might be for Sean Kelly. Still plenty of strength in those big legs. He's 33 years old now, Sean. Let's go back down to the start while Kelly continues his climb to the summit. And this looks like the legs of Robert Miller. Robert was telling me today that he's never been to Dundee before, which is rather surprising, of course, because Robert comes not far away at Glasgow. He's going home tomorrow, but right now he's got to face the climb of the law. The man who won that marvellous stage of the Tour de France at Super-Bagnères. While Miller makes his start, we join Kelly again as he approaches the line here now. Well, one would have expected Kelly to challenge Paul Curran, whose time has withstood at least 40 riders since he finished.
Well, it's amazing the power of this man, because he's still keeping the big gear going around over the top as we keep coming around to the top of this climb, which a lot of the French riders here are comparing to a miniature Puy de Dôme. It goes round in a corkscrew to finish on the top of the Law.
So Kelly, how nice it is to see Sean Kelly racing on British roads. He's built his reputation in Europe, and we only occasionally get to see him racing over here. And now he's giving this one last good dig as he tries to accelerate round the bend up towards the finish. Sean Kelly trying to save a few seconds here. It's really hurt in this climb, you know. He's put a lot of effort in. It remains to be seen what the time will tell us as he comes up, but he's already outside Paul Curran's time. That's how good Curran's ride was. Kelly only 10th best, 6:9.78. So Sean Kelly will not be over pleased with that, and he certainly looks to me as though he's taken a bit of pain as well on the climb. So the star of the Dutch PDM team reflecting a little bit on that ride. He's lost 9 seconds then to Paul Curran, and of course we still have Robert Miller and Malcolm Elliott to come up, of the noted men. And here is Robert Miller on his way up towards the top. And Paul, you were with Robert Miller as his manager in the World Championships a couple of days ago. Tell us about that.
Well, Robert was very motivated for the World Championships. Again, I think like Sean Kelly, he was a little disappointed with his performance, probably affected by the fact that the rain came down at half distance. Robert really doesn't like racing in the rain. It had been 35 degrees up until that time, and really when the rain came down it affected a lot of riders. And Robert here would really like to put a good performance in Dundee on his hometown, in his home ground of Scotland.
Well, there we are, Miller with his long hair waving in the wind. But as Miller approaches the finish, Richard has found Sean Kelly, who now has finally got his breath back.
Sean, hard work coming up that hill.
Yeah, it's a very difficult prologue. It's not really a prologue, it's a hill time trial. Right. Let's call it a hill prologue. I haven't seen many prologues as difficult as this.
Happy? 10th overall, as of now? It's enough?
Yeah, 10th overall. First thing is, after the World Championships on Sunday, getting so close. And although I finished third, which is a good place, but it's really, I think, the most disappointing place, because when you finish second or third, and especially it was, as it came down to a sprint, I was very disappointed, and the morale is, it's difficult at this moment. The morale is low, and I think it just gets started into this event. I think, you know, from the time from tomorrow on, it will be better.
Well, this is Malcolm Elliott, the rider who starts last by the virtue of the fact he won the Kelloggs Tour of Britain 1 year ago. And now he knows the time to beat is that of Paul Curran, because he's been told. Now, can he do it? Well, I must say that that interview there with Sean Kelly was rather emotional, and quite clearly Sean is upset. This is Reynolds finishing. 6:1.91, and Keith Reynolds has done a good one. 5th place at the moment. So I think Keith should be quite pleased with that. This is Robert Miller now from our helicopter making his final turns up to the summit of the Law, and he's found himself quite an acceleration. He looks here to be actually going a little bit quicker than Sean Kelly.
Well, if any prologue in the world could have suited Robert Miller, this is the one, and he's really fighting all the way up to the top. It's a difficult climb to judge, as Sean Kelly said earlier. You have to start reasonably quickly and save just a little bit till you get to the top and really accelerate. Miller sprinting here, as he has done on many stages of the Tour de France, to the top of a climb.
Indeed he has, Paul, and the best this year, of course, at Super Bagnères, where he beat Pedro Delgado to the top. This time it's a Scottish crowd cheering him up, and of course Robert Miller, the only Scot, as he makes the finish line here now. He's still got to beat that magic time of 6 minutes by Curran. He's not going to do that, look. 6:7.92 for only 11th place then. So let's have a look at the overall situation so far, with Malcolm Elliott still to finish. Paul Curran remains the leader from Pascal Lance, Laurent Jalabert and Martin Early in 4th place. Reynolds there in 5th. And this is Malcolm Elliott now, the only man who can upset the leaderboard. And Malcolm Elliott, like Paul Curran and like Keith Reynolds, a former British amateur hill climb champion. Now, can he pull off what would be a great result here for him?
Well, as you look down at Elliott here, it's interesting to note that he's had 2 good stage races in his legs this month. He won a stage in the Tour of Burgos and then went to the Tour of Galicia and won a stage there.
This has been far and away the best season of Malcolm Elliott. He joined the Teca team this year. He won the points competition and 2 stages in the Tour of Spain. A little bit disappointed he couldn't ride the Tour de France, but it might well be because he didn't ride the Tour de France. He's now coming to this race fresher than most. He also, by the way, didn't ride the World Championship, and look at the ride! 5 minutes 48.99. Malcolm Elliott has wiped the rest of the race out of sight. I'm not surprised he could hardly get off the bike there. He's completely exhausted himself, but what a ride by Malcolm Elliott. He has gone over 11 seconds ahead of the next best finisher, and that will be Paul Curran. And there's confirmation of that. Curran is 2nd, Pascal Lance is 3rd, and Jalabert 4th, the 2 young professionals from Toshiba. And we have Brian Walton 7th, Mike Wilson gets 9th, Phil Anderson 10th.
Listen, that's yellow now. Is anybody going to get it back off you?
Well, I think it's, I mean, I can't really wish, well, I mean, I wish for a repeat of last year, but you can't expect it every year. It's the hardest thing ever to, it's hard enough to win a race, but to keep the title is going to be even harder still. But obviously I think I've got the form now. It's, I knew today was going to be a good .2 form in this race, and I really psyched myself up for this. But we've got a strong team, and we've got some hard countries to go over, but yeah, I feel confident now. Having won this, I don't know what the margin was. What is the margin, do you know?
Enough.
Yeah, as long as just keep it that way till Westminster.
Malcolm Elliott enjoying the rewards of his day's hard labours, and if he stays in this sort of form, they're going to struggle to get that yellow jersey back off him before Westminster. Now then, I'm back up here on top of the law. The riders have left us, but I'm not alone. Quick word about the rest of this race before I explain away what's going on behind me. We're off to Glasgow tomorrow, 117 miles, 1 or 2 nasty little climbs en route. It would be nice if Robert Miller could make something of an impression. Glasgow, of course, Robert's hometown. As for Dundee, well, the city and the people here have proved to be marvellous hosts. A big thank you for that. What's taking place behind, in fact, is part of the city's 3rd annual fireworks display. They're marking the day that the tour came to town. It was Elliott, of course, producing the sparks a little earlier in the day. Right now, I think we'll leave it to the experts. We've got the best spot in town. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time. Bye-bye now.